The summer of 1985 was unusually warm in Helena, Montana, time when the air smelled of pine and wildflowers, and the skies stayed clear for weeks. On June 15th, friends and family gathered at the edge of Lake Leckler, a quiet forest body of water about 40 miles outside town. It was here that Thomas Whitmore and Elaine Harper exchanged vows in what locals would later describe as the most beautiful wedding they'd ever attended. The groom, a skilled mechanical engineer with a calm demeanor, looked striking in his crisp black suit. Elaine, a schoolteacher with a love for poetry and nature, wore a vintage lace gown that once belonged to her grandmother. Everything felt perfect, almost too perfect. The couple had chosen the remote lakeside setting deliberately. Thomas had spent summers there as a child, and Elaine had once confessed she dreamed of saying, "I do" beneath the open sky, far from city lights. Guests sipped cider, laughter echoed through the trees, and a local folk band played soft, earthy melodies as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Photographers captured candid moments, Elaine dancing barefoot on the dock, Thomas spinning her with childlike joy. One photo in particular, where they're seen walking hand in hand into the woods for a private moment, would later become iconic for eerie reasons. By nightfall, the crowd began to thin. Close family stayed in rented cabins nearby, while Thomas and Elaine disappeared into a forest cabin they had booked for their first night as husband and wife. They were supposed to drive out early the next morning to catch a chartered plane heading to Denali National Park in Alaska, honeymoon destination Thomas had planned in secret, meant to surprise Elaine with snow-covered peaks and solitude. But when the charter company called Thomas's parents to ask why the couple hadn't shown up at the airstrip, worry began to set in. At first, no one panicked. Maybe they'd overslept. Maybe the newlyweds had decided to take a detour, or simply lost track of time in the afterglow of celebration. But phone calls went unanswered. The caretaker of the cabin where they were staying knocked, waited, then let himself in only to find the place empty. Their clothes and bags were untouched, and the wedding gifts were still stacked neatly near the door. The only thing missing was the car. No signs of struggle. No broken glass. Not even a footprint outside in the dirt. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Authorities launched a local search. Drones and choppers weren't common back then, so boots hit the ground. Dozens of volunteers scoured the nearby woods, while officers questioned anyone who might have seen the couple after the ceremony. A gas station attendant, 12 miles north, thought he might have seen a vehicle matching their rental around 4 a.m. but couldn't remember the license plate. Beyond that, the trail ran cold. In the span of 12 hours, Thomas and Elaine Whitmore had gone from newlyweds with a future ahead to the center of a mystery no one could explain. The moment the newlyweds' disappearance was confirmed, Helena authorities treated it as an emergency. A joint search effort was launched by local police, forest rangers, and even members of the couple's church community. Helicopters with floodlights scanned the nearby cliffs and valleys for any sign of wreckage. Divers swept the lake where the wedding had taken place, fearing the worst. For the first week, search dogs were deployed across several forest trails, branching off from the cabin. But no scent trail lasted more than a few yards. It was as if nature itself had swallowed them whole. Detectives combed through every detail of Thomas and Elaine's lives. Had either of them spoken of running away? Were there enemies, debts, or family tensions? But by all accounts, the Whitmores were a couple deeply in love and financially stable. They had no criminal history, no known mental health issues, and nothing in their past suggested a reason to vanish. Their car, a rented white 1985 Buick LeSabre, had also vanished without a trace. Not a single camera captured it leaving the area, though. To be fair, this was a time before highway surveillance was common. Frustration grew as tips dwindled. Psychics were called in. One insisted the couple had crossed into another realm, through a tear in the earth. Another claimed Elaine was still alive and trapped underground. Their statements were dismissed, but it reflected how desperate the investigation had become. At one point, detectives followed a strange lead from a forest ranger who found a charred wedding invitation nailed to a tree, miles away from the original venue. When the forensics team tested it, they found fingerprints, none of which matched Thomas, Elaine, or anyone in attendance. Months passed. The media, once ablaze with the story of the vanished newlyweds, moved on. In early 1986, the couple was officially declared missing under suspicious circumstances. But with no crime scene, no suspects, and no evidence of a struggle, the case couldn't proceed any further. Their families refused to hold funerals. Elaine's parents left their home and relocated to Arizona. Thomas's father reportedly kept the porch light on every night until his death in 1989, convinced his son would walk through the door one day. Eventually, the files were boxed up and marked inactive. A young officer who had worked the case fresh out of the academy later recalled a strange silence that surrounded it. Other missing persons cases, there's always noise, rumors, false sightings, activity. But with this one, nothing. Like they were erased from the world in one breath. Despite the eerie circumstances, without new leads, the official position was simple: Thomas and Elaine Whitmore were gone. Their honeymoon became their grave, though no one knew where, or how, or why. 6 years after the mysterious disappearance of Thomas and Elaine Whitmore, the case had long since faded from public memory until an envelope arrived on a rainy October morning in 1991. It was delivered to the home of Linda Harper, Elaine's older sister, who had since moved to a quieter neighborhood on the outskirts of Spokane. The envelope had no return address, no postage stamp, and no handwriting. It was perfectly sealed, completely blank except for Linda's name typed across the front in faded, blocky letters. Something about it felt cold. Clinical. Inside was a single photograph. No letter, no message, no explanation. The image was grainy and gray-toned, almost like it had been taken with night vision equipment or an old security camera. In the center stood a man with his back to the camera, on what looked like a rocky cliffside dusted with snow. His silhouette was unmistakable. To Linda it looked just like Thomas Whitmore. His posture, his build, even the way his left hand curled slightly inward, a result of an old high school injury. But there was something off about the photo. The man appeared to be wearing the same suit he wore on his wedding night. Linda rushed the image to the Helena Police Department, desperate to know if this was finally a lead. Investigators sent the photo for analysis, but experts couldn't determine when or where it had been taken. The cliffside terrain didn't match anything in the immediate area of their wedding venue, but one analyst noted strange horizontal lines at the top of the photo. He believed it had been taken off a screen, possibly a paused video feed or security monitor. But whose screen? From where? Things grew stranger. Linda claimed that 2 nights after receiving the letter, she heard tapping on her kitchen window, just past midnight. When she turned on the light, no one was there, but her porch camera glitched and reset during that same minute. The police reviewed the footage and found only a few seconds of static. That same week, she reported her landline ringing multiple times without anyone on the other end. The calls always came between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. one night. The static turned into a faint voice. She swore it whispered her name. Detectives, eager for any breakthrough, reopened the case temporarily. They cross-referenced the photo with all known satellite and weather data from 1985 to 1991, hoping to find a matching location. Nothing. They tracked mail logs, camera stores, and photo developers in a 300-mile radius, looking for anyone who may have printed or handled the image. Again, nothing. No fingerprints on the envelope. No DNA. No leads. When asked in an interview why someone would send such a photo, Linda's answer was chillingly simple: they wanted me to know they were still watching, and that she's not dead. By the mid-1990s, the Whitmore case had become something of a dark legend in the small towns surrounding Clearwater National Forest. Though officially cold, the mystery clung to the region like fog, passed from generation to generation in hushed voices and late-night campfire stories. Locals who once lived near Lake LeClaire, or the logging trails nearby, began to speak of strange events, odd sightings, and unexplained sounds that many claimed had started right after Thomas and Elaine vanished. A retired forest ranger named Carl Denvers, who had patrolled the area since the late 70s, reported something unsettling. In the fall of 1986, just a year after the couple disappeared, he claimed to have seen a flickering light deep in the woods near an area called Frost Hollowland that had been marked as unstable due to underground fissures. When he hiked closer, the light vanished. In its place, he found a circle of ash and a partially burned piece of lace that eerily resembled a wedding veil. He handed it over to authorities, but it was lost in evidence handling, or so the story goes. There were other accounts too. Hikers and hunters often heard what they described as radio static and garbled voices coming from places where no signals should have reached. One young camper said she woke in the middle of the night to see a woman in white standing silently at the tree line, staring at her. When she turned on her flashlight, the figure was gone, but footprints, bare wet ones, were left in the pine needles. The most chilling part: the prints led away from the lake, not toward it. More than one resident swore they'd seen what looked like a man and woman in formal clothing moving between the trees. They didn't walk, one man told a local newspaper. They glided. No sound, no movement of the leaves. Just drifting through the trees like they didn't belong here anymore. A hunter even caught what he believed was a woman's face in the background of one of his trail cam photos. A pale, distorted image peeking from behind a tree, wearing what looked like a veil. The film was later damaged in a fire before anyone could confirm its authenticity. Despite how bizarre these claims sounded, there was an undeniable pattern. The sightings always happened near the same stretch of forest, and always at night. Every story included some mention of old wedding attire, flickering lights, or radio sounds. Some dismissed them as urban myths, ghost stories born from grief and curiosity, but others, especially those who had lived in the area the longest, believed something more. They didn't just think the couple was still out there, they believed the forest had taken them. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't planning to give them back. While local whispers and ghostly sightings kept the legend of the Whitmores alive in Helena and the surrounding towns, another thread of the mystery quietly unraveled far from public view, buried in dusty archives and redacted government memos. In 1995, a freelance journalist named Mason Reed, researching decommissioned Cold War facilities across the U.S., stumbled across a curious file while digging through Freedom of Information Act releases. Among stacks of technical documents related to a military outpost codenamed Station Thorn, one phrase stood out: unauthorized civilian presence reported. June 16, 1985, entry breach confirmed. The date chilled Mason. June 16, 1985, the exact day after Thomas and Elaine vanished. Station Thorn, as it turned out, was a Cold Warrior surveillance and signal intelligence station, located within the northern boundary of Clearwater National Forest, less than 30 miles from Lake Leck. Officially, it had been shut down in the early 80s. But according to the documents, some underground parts of the facility had remained active for passive signal reception testing well into the late 1980s. Most of the facility was buried beneath the forest floor, accessible only through camouflaged tunnel entrances and monitored with motion-triggered sensors. One file detailed a temporary loss of power and unexpected signal spike that occurred on the morning of the couple's disappearance. Digging deeper, Mason discovered several pages missing, entire lines blacked out with heavy ink. But one memo, dated July 1985, referenced a pair of unidentified civilian footprints found near one of the sealed entrances. The note emphasized, no personnel authorized for contact. Observation only. Standing protocol. Do not intervene. That detail stuck with him. Do not intervene. What exactly had they seen? And more importantly, what were they afraid of letting out? A strange twist came when Mason tried to request a site visit to the area where Station Thorn was believed to have been. He was contacted days later by a man claiming to work for a federal survey office, warning him not to pursue the lead further, citing ongoing land stability concerns. When Mason pressed for more information, the man abruptly ended the call. 2 days later, Mason's laptop was stolen from his hotel room. Nothing else was taken. The incident was never solved, but Mason had made copies of the documents and handed them off to an archivist friend before leaving the state. He never wrote the article. In 1996, an anonymous envelope was sent to a Helena library. Inside was a single, burned blue of an underground map showing a tunnel system beneath Clearwater Forest. Scribbled in the margin, in pencil, were just 5 words: she walked into the station. To this day, no one knows who sent it. But it reawakened long-dormant rumors that Thomas and Elaine hadn't simply disappeared into the wilderness, but had entered something never meant for them. Something buried, something forgotten, something still active. In early 1997, 12 years after Thomas and Elaine Whitmore disappeared without a trace, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source, not from police, not from a private investigator, but from orbit. NASA had recently partnered with a defense contractor to test an advanced thermal imaging satellite over remote parts of North America. The goal was simple: test the satellite's ability to detect subtle temperature shifts through dense vegetation, terrain, and even snow. One of the designated test zones was the northern edge of Clearwater National Forest, a mostly uninhabited stretch of land thought to be geologically inactive and unremarkable. But when the thermal data from the past came in, analysts noticed something strange. Among the deep blues and greens indicating cool, untouched terrain, there was a warm anomaly, one that didn't make sense. Deep beneath a thick canopy of trees, in a gully, long overgrown and untouched by roads, was the clear outline of a car. That, in itself, wasn't alarming. Old vehicles were sometimes dumped in the woods, but what raised alarms were the 2 heat signatures detected inside. Faint, but undeniable, one in the front seat, the other in the back. The temperature levels were inconsistent with any living human, yet too warm to be explained by natural decay or metal retention alone. At first, the anomaly was dismissed as a software glitch, but a second pass, 3 days later, captured the same image again, same coordinates, same heat pattern. Military analysts flagged it, thinking it could be related to illegal activity, possibly smuggling or the use of abandoned vehicles for covert drops. The image was quietly forwarded to a regional task force, who in turn passed it to local forestry officials for follow-up. That's when a retired Helena detective, who had obsessively followed the Whitmore case even after retirement, saw the report and recognized the location. It was just 11 miles from Lake Leckler. He personally drove to the coordinates, hacking through overgrowth with a machete and a rusted compass. The area had been untouched for years, choked with moss, fallen branches, and soft earth. But then, wedged at the base of a collapsed ravine and partially buried in the forest floor, he found it. The skeletal frame of a white 1985 Buick LeSabre. The license plate, though rusted and barely visible, matched the rental car Thomas and Elaine had driven away in on their wedding night. The discovery made headlines across Montana overnight. Newlywed's missing car, found after 12 years in forest. But that wasn't even the strangest part. Inside the vehicle were several haunting clues. On the dashboard lay 2 wedding rings, still perfectly placed side by side. In the back seat sat a weather-worn leather journal, its pages soaked from years of forest damp but still partially legible. Some entries were dated as late as 1996, over a decade after they were declared missing. The entries were scattered, paranoid, and increasingly frantic. Mentions of tunnels, static on a radio that wasn't there, shadows moving outside the car, and one phrase repeated over and over, etched into the final page in trembling handwriting: "They're still watching, from above. We can't leave. We were never supposed to find it." Following the discovery of the Buick deep in the ravine, authorities cordoned off the area for forensic analysis. Hazmat-suited investigators combed through every inch of the car and its surroundings, expecting only bones, rust, and forest decay. But what they found inside the vehicle raised more questions than it answered. Strangely, there were no human remains, none, not even fragments. The seats, while weathered and torn, bore no signs of trauma or blood. Yet both the passenger and driver side seatbelts were buckled, as if someone had been sitting there, and simply vanished. The journal recovered from the back seat became a focal point of the investigation. Its final pages were warped and almost unreadable, but experts managed to digitally reconstruct portions. The entries began mundane: food supplies holding, still no planes overhead, we'll hike again tomorrow, but quickly descended into paranoia. Elaine's handwriting, confirmed by samples from her old classroom notes, described low humming sounds at night, metal doors beneath the soil, and a voice on the radio saying her name. One entry simply read, "They opened it again. We saw the light. Tom says we shouldn't have gone that far." Even more disturbing was what they found in the trunk. Wrapped in an old emergency blanket was a black handheld radio, heavily corroded, but still intact. When specialists tried to power it using a modern receiver, the device emitted a single burst of static, then nothing. Yet during the examination, several team members reported hearing faint whispers in the static. Some claimed they heard the word Elaine being repeated. One technician abruptly quit the job the following day, refusing to speak about what he heard. It wasn't the signal, he reportedly told a friend. It was where it was coming from. Beneath the driver's seat, wedged tightly into the floor mat, was a rolled strip of undeveloped film. It was sent to a restoration lab, and after weeks of processing, just 2 images were recovered. The first showed a tunnel-like corridor with walls made of smooth, dark metal clearly underground. The second was far more disturbing: a blurry figure standing at the end of that corridor, facing the camera, wearing what looked like a shredded wedding dress. Her face was unrecognizable, overexposed by light except for her eyes, which were wide open and staring directly at the lens. No one has been able to explain where the photo was taken, or who developed it. The manufacture of the film roll had stopped production in 1983. To this day, no trace of Thomas or Elaine has ever been found outside of that car. The journal, the photos, The rings all remain locked away in a restricted evidence archive. Access is limited. The area around the discovery site was quietly reclassified by federal agencies as environmentally unstable, effectively making it off-limits to the public. But those who've seen the evidence, and read every page of Elaine's haunting journal, all agree on one thing: the couple didn't die in that forest. They disappeared into something far older, far deeper, and far more secret than anyone was ever meant to find. To this day, the disappearance of Thomas and Elaine Whitmore remains one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in modern history. No bodies, no official cause of death, just a car buried in the forest, a journal filled with cryptic warnings, and fragments of a life that seemed to unravel far beyond the boundaries of the world we know. Some believe the couple stumbled upon a forgotten military project, something sealed and buried for a reason. Others are convinced they crossed into something much older, something not meant for human eyes. A tier, in reality, a station that never truly shut down, or perhaps a forest that watches and waits. Authorities have since closed the case, citing lack of evidence for further investigation. But those who've seen the satellite images, the recovered photos, the journal entries, they don't call it closure. They call it a cover-up. And somewhere, deep beneath those trees, something still hums at night, unseen, undisturbed, listening, because maybe the Whitmores didn't vanish. Maybe they were taken.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.